Welcome to I Got a Guy podcast, a podcast carefully designed to introduce a wide range of very talented and highly skilled professionals ready to share their knowledge and advice with you. Please welcome the host of I Got a Guy podcast, Michael Drelichars. Welcome to I Got a Guy podcast. I'm your host, Michael Drelichars. Thank you so much for joining us yet again. We really appreciate all of the subscribers and everyone sharing the podcast. I know this means that you're getting some great information from our guests, and proud of all the guests that we've had. And we continually try to be different and bring different guests in, and not the same old run of the mill industries. We want to vary it up a bit, because you never know where the paths may cross, and we might be able to serve another niche that we didn't even realize that we had. So to our loyal subscribers, thank you. To our new listeners, thank you for joining us. I encourage you to subscribe to the channel so you'll get notified every time we do publish a new episode, which is typically every Wednesday. But stay subscribe and stay tuned to us, and hopefully you get some great information and can share these guests with your circles of influence. As you all know, that this show was really born out of a book called The Go-Giver, which talks a lot about networking from a standpoint of growing a business is more about giving referrals than getting referrals. And so the purpose of this show was really to help small businesses grow and prosper, and gain some referrals and gain some traction in the marketplace. So I do this to help all kinds of small businesses grow. If you are a small business owner yourself and you would like to be a guest on the show, I encourage you to go to our website, which is igotaguypodcast.com. That's igotaguypodcast.com. There's a contact us link that pops up. You can fill in the information, send it over, and we can make have a discussion and get you into the schedule for an upcoming episode. So look forward to that. As I typically do on our shows, the book, The Go-Giver, lists 5 laws of stratospheric success. And I like to recap one of the laws that I believe relates to our guest of the week. The law I want to touch on today is called the law of authenticity. And it's defined by the most valuable gift you have to give is yourself. The most valuable gift you have to give is yourself. And I think as you get to know this guest, you're going to see how he is a very authentic person. And it's interesting because most of the guests that we've had on the show I've known for quite some time, and many years in some cases. One of the guests I've had on numerous times has been a friend of mine for 40 plus years. But every now and then I meet a new guest, and but their business is interesting and unique, and we have a great conversation. And I invite them to join us on the podcast, and that's the case this week. We're recording this episode now here in June of 2024, and just recently, my daughters and I attended the Indianapolis 500, and this year there happened to be a 4-hour rain delay. And I met a couple, a gentleman and his father, who were sitting in front of us, and we waited out the rain delay in my car as the storm rolled through Indianapolis, and waited for the rain to clear, and then we went back into the stands to enjoy the race. And in the process, I got to meet our guest this week. So we had a really interesting conversation, and I really felt that you as listeners would love to hear from him. So I invited him to join us. So please help me welcome Andy Hopf from Hopf Environmental. Andy, thank you for being with us this week.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. And I'm glad that you mentioned the Indy 500. I was hoping we would get to talk a little bit about that. I'll say a few things about it, and if it's not on topic, cut it out. But
It'll be good.
I live in Brownsburg, Indiana, which is 15 miles from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. I've been to the time trials and the track several times in my life, but never had the, courage to go to the actual race because, growing up here in Indiana and hearing about it, it's obviously a great event, but it's 300,000 people all coming into town. There's a lot of drinking, debauchery, and a lot of stories. So anyway, my dad had surgery last fall, had a a mass removed from his head, and he gave us quite the scare, and it kind of woke me up and just helped me realize that I need to spend more time with my mom and my dad that live up in West Lafayette, 45 minutes away. I don't see them as much as I should, so we bit the bullet. We bought tickets to the 500, and we bought great seats up there in turn one, a row or two in front of you. And my dad, he doesn't walk very well anymore. So my plan was to drive down by the track, get there early, park close to the track, and not have to walk far. And I did the exact opposite. We parked a mile and a half away from the gate. I found free parking on the street. And being the frugal person I am, I barely fit my car in there. And we walked and we hiked, and then we got there, and that storm rolled through, and I didn't know what we were going to do. I thought we were going to go hunker underneath those bleachers for 4 hours and sit in the gravel. And my dad overheard you say you were going to your car, and just turned around and asked you, "Hey, person we just met 20, 30 minutes ago, can we come sit in your car?" And, bless your soul, you thought about it for a second, and then you realize there's really no good reason to say no, because your other daughter was in the infield hanging out with her friends, and you said, "Hey, yeah, we've got room." And thank the Lord you let us stay there, because that storm rolled through, and he was really hurting. And it was, like you mentioned before, it was great for my father to be able to talk to your daughter, who's kind of shy. And you and I had a great conversation there, and I even took a nap in your car and rested up. So it was great. But
it worked out well, and I'm glad we were able to do that for you. And the hesitation was simply because I forgot that my daughter, my older daughter, was not with us at the time. She was in the infield and staying with her friends in the infield. So we actually had a couple extra seats, and I'm just really glad it worked out. And we were parked close to the track. So many years of experience.
Yeah, it was great, and I admire the fact that you come every year, and we're gonna try to do the same thing next year.
Yeah, absolutely.
After all that praise, I'm gonna give you some negative feedback. My last name's pronounced Hopf. It's Hopf. Yeah, Hopf, and it's one of them damn things I've been fighting my whole life. It's like a boy named Sue. I've had to fight my way through life, correcting people. And the Hopfs are from Jasper, Indiana, southern Indiana, and it's a German last name. I've been to Germany, and I asked a German guy, I said, "Hey, how do you pronounce this name here?" And he looked at it, and he said, "Hopf." The way that you read it like it's written, Hopf. That's how the Germans say it. And we here in America, we say Hopf. I don't know if that's because we're trying to be less German in the 1910s and 20s, but it's something all us Hopfs have to fight through. But yeah, that's it. That's okay. It happens all the time. All right. So do you want me to talk about how I got into geology and environmental consulting, or? Okay.
Yeah. Let's talk about your company and how you got into it, and your passion for that.
Okay. So I own Hopf Environmental Consulting. We're an environmental consulting firm based in Brownsburg, Indiana, basically Indianapolis, central Indiana. We do work all over Indiana. I've done work all across the country. As far east as New Jersey, far west is California. You can fill in the blanks, Florida, Michigan. But really, our bread and butter is here in central Indiana. We primarily do phase 1 environmental site assessments, and we do a lot of them. When the economy was better, we did 750 one year and 500 other years. Last year was a down year, but the reason why I got into this field is, again, back to my father. It was the spring of 1997 in West Lafayette, and I was sitting in my bedroom, probably up to no good, watching TV or, just messing around. And he comes in and walks in and drops this book on my desk and says, "Hey, you need to figure out what you're going to do." you can't stay here anymore. You're turning 18, and in the fall, or in the spring, you're graduating from high school. So figure out what you want to do. You can't stay here any longer. And so that manual he dropped on my desk was the catalog for majors at Purdue University. Purdue University's in West Lafayette. It's a great school. It was in my backyard, and yeah, it's wonderful. And so I was like, all right, well, I didn't want to stay here anyway. So I started thumbing through it and read about environmental engineering, which I thought was a little bit out of my league based on my grades. I went to a really great high school, West Lafayette High School, and got like a 3.0 B average, BC student. But from other people I was talking to that tried to get in engineering with better grades than they didn't get in. So I thumbed a little bit further and found this thing called environmental geoscience and read about that. And it really applied to me. It basically said that environmental geoscience or environmental geology is an applied geologic field that helps solve real world problems, deals with pollution. So the little I read about it, I said, okay, yeah, sign me up. And my dad looked at it and kind of cringed, and he's like, son, there's calculus here, there's chemistry here, there's all this stuff. And he's like, well, if you want to go for it, go for it. And so I did. I signed up and really worked my tail off at Purdue. Got through. I was not the valedictorian or the salutatorian. I passed. I did really well in the science classes, the geology, environmental science classes. I did well. I enjoyed that. But like the calculus, the chemistry, not so great. But anyway, I got through, and then I graduated in May of 2002. It was a 5-year program. That's how tough it was.
Sure.
Or that maybe says something about the pace I went through it. But then I was looking for work in Indiana doing environmental consulting, and I applied everywhere. I remember I was out west hanging out and doing geologic classes out there, and came back here, and I just could not find work. And then I think I graduated in May, and then I was out across from Harry's Chocolate Shop, which is a famous bar in West Lafayette, and I'm planting trees at a landscaping company for like $8-9 an hour with a college degree, and just kind of questioned my life. And I got some emails and phone calls from a company out in Baltimore that long story short, hired me to work on a small drill rig to take soil samples. And so I went out to Baltimore for a few months, got trained, and then they moved me down to the Jacksonville, Florida area, and I lived in St. Augustine, Florida there, worked on a drill rig. And, again, as manual labor, but I was doing things with the earth and getting some experience, and
Sure.
worked there for a year. And then while I was on the job site at Universal Studios, I was talking to a geologist who had hired that company, and he was surprised that I was out there, sweating away doing manual labor. And through him, got a job with an actual environmental consulting company. Worked there for a while, and then my girlfriend, who's my wife now, got into vet school up at Purdue, and so we spent a year apart. She had originally gone down to Florida with me, and that just wasn't working out being apart. So I decided to move back to Indiana to be with her. Again, tried to find work doing environmental consulting in Indiana. Applied to everybody. Even had one company bring me in and had an interview, and they immediately pushed me over to their drilling crew and said, basically, yeah, we'll hire you, but we want you to do manual labor. There's nothing wrong with that, but I wanted to, work as a geologist, and so I couldn't find work.
Sure.
And then was fortunate enough to get into Purdue again and actually pursue a master's degree in environmental engineering. And I got a grant through the Indiana Department of Transportation to do research on the remediation of polyaromatic hydrocarbons in soil, which is basically like diesel range contaminants, and come up with a decision tree for that. And so I went Purdue for another 2 years, got a master's degree in environmental engineering. And while I was doing that, I did get a job finally doing environmental consulting in Indianapolis, did that part-time until I graduated, and then worked for them for a few more years, and then kind of bounced around to different companies, and really enjoyed that work. I worked doing what's called phase 2 environmental assessments, and that's where we actually go out in the field, take soil and groundwater samples, figure out which part of the sample we want to send to the laboratory based on which part we think is impacted or not impacted, saturated, not saturated, and then worked with some really good engineers and worked on actual remediation systems to where we would pump out soil vapors and lower the water table. Here in Indiana, central Indiana, we've got glacial clay till everywhere. And so basically to clean up volatile organic compounds like gasoline when it gets in the ground, you apply a vacuum to the subsurface. Here's the ground, here's the water table, and it's polluted kind of like right in here. You apply a vacuum, you lower the water table, which isn't hard to do here, and then you're still pulling vapors out from this area, and that's how you can clean up the subsurface. So I worked as a technician keeping that equipment running. I worked as an engineer helping designing those, and really enjoyed that work, and worked for a few different companies, and like a selfish young man, bouncing around to get a few extra bucks here or there, and playing that game. And then circumstances made it such that I started my own business. When you do environmental consulting for a large company, you have to be a certain amount billable in your work. And I have no problem working. I like to work, and so when you're busy, it's very easy to be billable 95% of the time. But when work slows, then it's hard to be billable. And the powers that be, management, who aren't engineers and scientists, want you to keep the same billability. But if there's no work, then you have the moral fight of, what do I do here? Do I slow down my rate of work so that I hit this goal, or do I don't know. It's a difficult thing to do. So that's one thing I didn't like. And then in 2008, layoffs started coming around, and they kept me on because I was making them money. But the first person they laid off was a human resources lady who'd been there 25 years. And then that just kind of made me think, okay, wait, maybe there isn't loyalty out here like there was in the olden days. I wanted to work for a company for 30, 40 years, have the corner office, and that be my thing. And that kind of just opened my eyes to how the world really was. And so anyway, I started my own company in 2013, worked out of my garage for a couple months, and I had my cell phone there on the desk, and just, waited for it to ring, and that didn't happen. And put on a suit and walked around downtown Indianapolis, and knocked on every lawyer's door that I knew. And to my surprise, a lot of them wanted to talk to me and listen to me, and that was shocking to me, because who was I? I just started my business, and in retrospect, they were kind people that were open to hearing what I had to say, but I believe they thought I was bringing them work, and really what I was trying to do is I was trying to get work from them. and I
Sure.
realized that's a two-way street. Um, so I did that for a while, and it didn't do much work at all for the first couple years, and that was stressful for our family. I've got a lovely wife who I've been married to for uh, 16 years now, and um, when I started my own business, she was pregnant with our second child, and eventually she got fed up with that and was like, "Look, one, you need to get out of our garage. Get out of the garage." And so I built an office out in my barn here in Central Indiana, and then worked a security night shift for a couple years until my business took off, and then
Sure.
about 2016, I found a niche doing phase one environmental site assessments, and just been going hard ever since, and surrounded myself with good smart people. um, I've got a guy who I've worked with for 8 years, who didn't have a lot of experience when we started working together, and just phenomenal worker, worked hard, and we've been together since. He's actually spun off and started his own business out in Virginia, and so we work together when we need each other. And then now I got another young gentleman who I'm working with, and so yeah, that's pretty much how I got to here.
To where you are. Yeah. Well, that's an awesome story. First of all, going back to I think you said 1997 when you realized that this was a field you wanted to pursue. From looking in a book for Purdue University to following and carrying that dream through to running your own business. That's tremendous perseverance through some challenging times, which is really where you get your character. I mean, your character builds through those times. Life is not easy. Life is challenging for all of us, and it's what you do during those challenging times to stay committed to your passion and your passionate beliefs that makes a difference. So I applaud you for sticking with it and building a company here to follow your dreams. And then on top of it, you're doing something really good for the environment, for the earth, or our world, where we live. And we're gonna take a short break here in a second, but really want to get into some details about the type of the type of things you do and how it benefits the surroundings, because it some of those technical terms may not make sense to a lot of individuals, and I want to make sure that we can bring it down to a level where people understand how important it is when you have a gas station on the corner or a dry cleaner, et cetera, and how your work is how valuable it is to our environments for sustainability and along keeping carcinogens out of the air, out of the soil, et cetera. But let's talk about that after the break. Before we do that, share with us your contact information. So as people hear these stories and they want to reach out to you, maybe they're building a building and they want to learn a little bit more. What's the best way for them to reach you and get in contact with you?
Yeah, the best way is to shoot me an email. And my email, I'm going to mispronounce my name here because it's easier to remember there. Um, it's Hopf at envirohopf.com, or if you just read it, it's Hopf at envirohopf.com. And I think you'll put something up when this airs, Michael. But it's
Yeah.
HOPF at ENVIROHOPF.com. And with that, I'm happy to help people out and advise people with information that I know about. But my services are geared more towards um, banks, developers of commercial and industrial
Mhm.
properties. For the person, uh, buying a home in a neighborhood, I don't know if I'll provide much value uh, to what you're doing, because I mean, I'd be happy to talk to you or whatever, but most likely if you're buying a quarter acre in a neighborhood that's already developed or whatever, that's probably going to be fine. They've already done their due diligence when they went to build that subdivision and whatnot. But I do help. I've helped some folks here in rural central Indiana that are buying old farms where they're 20, 30 acres. I've advised a guy who wanted advice about like how easy is it going to be for me to find water out here. There's some spots where it's easier and harder to find water. And I mean, the shorter answer is you're not going to know until you drill a hole in the ground and start pumping. But I've got access,
Sure.
and you all have access to it as well. There's databases and maps that show the soils, the geology, water bearing units, all that sort of stuff out there as well. So.
Yeah, yeah, and you're right. For those established neighborhoods, yeah, certainly in the residential communities, that's your efforts already done long before that. Just buying a piece of land, but we also have a lot of listeners that own commercial buildings or um, invest in commercial real estate, and I think that's where your services really can be of value. So, but let's chat about that after the break. We'll be right back here, and we'll continue talking here with Andy Hopf from Hopf Environmental. So, we'll be right back. Thank you for listening to I Got a Guy podcast. I hope you're getting a lot of knowledge from this week's guest. But now a word from our sponsor. Precise Fleet Tracking Solutions works with business owners that own commercial vehicles. We help these business owners enhance their growth and profit through the use of GPS tracking technology. Specifically, Precise Fleet Tracking Solutions is known for three key principles. First, we are very knowledgeable in the field of GPS tracking and working diligently to learn more every day. Second, we are accessible. We do not hide behind a toll-free number, and we do not have any overseas call centers. We know our clients personally, and we're extremely committed to serving all of our clients as we'd want to be served. And third, we are responsive. We deliver our GPS units promptly and work diligently to install as quickly as possible. Precise Fleet Tracking Solutions is consistently striving to exceed our clients' expectations. You can learn more about Precise Fleet Tracking Solutions at precisefleettracking.com or call us at 847-865-6008. Precise Fleet Tracking Solutions. We make GPS tracking simple. Now, back to the show. Okay, we are back. Thank you for sticking with us. I'm Michael Drellichars, host of I Got a Guy podcast. We are chatting here with Andy Hopf from Hopf Environmental. Andy is a geologist, and we had a lot of interesting discussion here in the first half of the episode. But I really want to get into some detail. But so, Andy, thanks for being with us again this week, and appreciate your contribution.
Yeah, my pleasure, Michael. It's an honor to be here.
So, like we were talking here before the break, I wanted to get into some details so our listeners can kind of get an idea how impactful some of these businesses can be to our environment. That as an average consumer, you may not realize. We have gas stations on the corners, all over our area, dry cleaning facilities, other manufacturing facilities. And sometimes things seep into the ground that the average consumer may not even know about. But you know a lot about that, and you help correct that.
Yeah, everything you said there is 100% true. Let me just say this, that the way that regulations are created now and enforced now, we're doing a pretty good job of preventing current contaminants from getting into the ground. Like, gas stations now, they've all got double walled, or not all, but most of them have double walled fiberglass tanks with leak detection, with, inventory gauging software. So if there's a leak, they know right away. And at least I speak mainly from experience in Indiana, but the states are all very similar. Indiana's done a great job already of going around and identifying old gas stations, old tanks that have leaked, and then they prioritize the releases, and then we've already gone out and got, from my understanding, all the high priority releases, cleaned them up, medium priority, and now, there's still some lingering low priority stuff that's out there. But so like when I do these phase 1 environmental site assessments, we're looking for things called recognized environmental conditions. And basically, if we think that there's a good chance that the soil or groundwater may be impacted. That's a recognized environmental condition. And then we recommend that they go out and do a phase 2 environmental site assessment, which involves taking soil and groundwater samples. And so just generally, like the two of the biggest polluters, one or any type of underground storage tank, okay, those have a high likelihood of leaking, especially if they're steel, they've been in the ground a long time. I always advise business owners, especially if it's, a small facility that's going to have a tank that's 1,000 gallons or less, just buy an above ground tank, above ground double wall tank, put it above ground, good to go. Don't bury things in the ground. It's a lot more difficult to monitor,
More
expensive.
risk.
More risk, exactly. Harder to clean up. Get a double walled tank, put it on concrete, you're good to go. And then just in general, when gasoline, diesel, oil, jet fuel leaks, it gets in the soil, that's not great. And then it gets in the groundwater, and that's not great either. However, oil and water doesn't mix. So, here's the water table, and then the oil, whatever comes down, most of it floats on the surface of the groundwater. Some of it does dissolve through, but for the most part, it floats, and it doesn't move that far away. This is Indiana, central Indiana, the way central Indiana works. If you're on a mountainside and it's all rock, contaminants can move a lot quicker there. But here in Indiana, if a gas station leaks, it usually doesn't go that far away. It stays within 20, 30 yards or less, depending on the amount of time it's there. So it's not that big of a deal. However, when dry cleaning solvents, chlorinated solvents get into the groundwater, that can be a really big deal because those contaminants are hydrophobic. They move through the groundwater, they dissolve in the groundwater, and they move very quickly and away. And so when I do work in certain downtown areas nearby where I live, it's a given that the groundwater is polluted down there. And it's just part of the way things are. So, what we do is we mitigate risk, right? So obviously, we don't want the soil and groundwater to be polluted or contaminated, but it is in a lot of areas. So how do we mitigate that risk? And what we do is we don't extract that groundwater for drinking water purposes. And we, in the last 20 years or so, we've gotten more concerned about vapors seeping up from the ground into people's homes, businesses, apartments. And so that's really the big risk now. I mean, the soil, you're not, if you say you build a building in downtown Indianapolis and the groundwater's polluted underneath there. So we're not going to get into the soil, right? It's the building on top of it. It's paved. Okay. So that's not a problem. We're not going to extract the groundwater because we've got municipal supply of groundwater. So really our main risk down there is vapors coming up from the ground. And so what happens a lot of times is when a property owner discovers the contamination, they will clean it up to a certain extent, and then they will file an activity use limitation or an environmental restrictive covenant on the property, which goes on the deed. And so basically that says, hey, look, we're going to leave things the way they are. What we have here is not moving off site. It's not impacting other people. We're not going to extract the groundwater. We're not going to, put a sandbox here. We're not going to use the soil as a sandbox for children. And then we're going to limit residential use on the property to second and higher stories. So the first floor will be commercial, the amount of vapors that are allowed in a commercial space are higher than residential. Okay. And if they build a new building, then they'll put an impermeable membrane underneath the property. They can put fans under there to suck the air out so it doesn't go up there anyway. But whenever I'm doing a phase 1 environmental site assessment and it's apartments and there's nothing on the first floor that's apartments, a light bulb always goes off in my head, and I think, okay, now why is that the case? You know,
Sure.
it's probably
Never thought
because
about that.
there's probably something going on there, and so it's just easier to turn that into a pizza shop or or whatever.
Or parking garage or
Um,
something.
yeah, or parking garage or whatever. So that's the way they mitigate the risk. And so that we do that, and then
So,
I do a wide. Go ahead, Michael. You have something?
well, I just wanted to close off that thought real quick.
Yeah.
So, when the contaminants are found in that property, and you said it's written on the deed. So, anytime
Mm-hmm.
that property is sold, that
Mm-hmm.
history is there with it. So,
Absolutely.
it could be sold 2 or 3 times, and 30 years from now or 40 years from now, somebody buys a property and they say, okay, so 40 years ago they realized that there was some contaminants in the soil so there's no surprises down the road.
Correct.
It's
Correct.
all about
And
documenting the deed.
yeah, it goes with the property deed. So it's a known entity or known fact. It goes with the property. Um, you know, I haven't done this myself, but if they wanted to change the land use, they could go back and take more samples and prove that they've. So okay, let me just back up a little bit. There's recognized environmental conditions. We find those. Then there's historical recognized environmental condition, or HRECs. That'd be a situation where, like, if a tank leaked, and then we or somebody came in, removed the tank, removed all the contaminants, and then resampled all around there, brought in clean fill material, and then there's no more pollution there. That would be a historical recognized environmental condition. And then, you'd be done. You'd be fine. The state issues a thing called a no further action letter, which basically means, you don't have to do anything else. In Illinois, I forget the term, but it's similar. It's something different. And then what I had described previously, where they put a restrictive covenant on the property, that's considered a controlled recognized environmental condition. So there's a recognized environmental condition that's being controlled by limiting the use of the property. And so you could come back and do more work, remove all that, and then petition the Indiana Department of Environmental Management to remove those requirements, and you could change the deed to not have those restrictions in the future. Lawyers, this is more up your alley than mine. But I believe that that is the case. So yeah, that's that.
And and when somebody were to treat that soil, they have to go down how many feet, how many yards down into the soil do they have to go to treat and clean it up before they feel that it's safe at the surface level?
Yeah, I mean, it depends where you're at. So I'm doing a lot of work, not a lot, or several jobs in Bloomington, Indiana. Okay, so Bloomington, Indiana, you drill down 4 or 5 feet, and then you're at bedrock. So there's only 4 or 5 feet soil there. Here, where I'm at, rural or Brownsburg, just northwest of Indianapolis, I've got to go 300 feet until I hit bedrock. But the short answer is you remove what's contaminated. And so if it was, let's just say, a gas station, the tanks are buried 10 feet underground, the tanks leak, you're probably digging down to 15 feet or so. And we sample the soil and figure out where it's impacted and where it's not. And so you stop where it's not impacted anymore. Over in Terre Haute,
So
Indiana,
you keep
yeah, in Terre Haute, Indiana, along the Wabash River, western Indiana, the depth of ground here where I'm at, groundwater is very shallow. It's 5 to 10 feet. And just so you guys know, a lot of people don't know this or may not know this. Underneath you, there is water, no matter where you're at in the world, and that's the groundwater. It might be, if you go out on the Lakeshore Drive in Michigan, it's 3-4 feet. It's basically where Lake Michigan is. If you see surface water, you can in essence look and see where that is, and that kind of goes uphill a little bit, but that's where the groundwater is. But in Terre Haute, it's the groundwater's a lot deeper there. They've got sandy soil, so things drain. And it's been interesting to me. I've done work out there, 5-10 years ago, and we'll do gas station work out there, and we'll pull a tank out of the ground, and it'll have pea-sized holes in the tank. You can tell it's been leaking forever, and then we'll sample the soil, sandy soils, and there won't be any contaminants in anywhere. But but that's because it all leaked through the sand and is gone. It doesn't get tied up into the sands. It's gone. And I'm all over the place here. When I used to work in Florida, northern Florida, they have sandy soils there, but the water table there is very shallow as well. And so the contaminants would actually kind of stay in the sand because it had nowhere to go. And up here in Indiana, we've got these organic soils. There's microorganisms in there that actually eat the petroleum hydrocarbons. And so bioremediation happens naturally here. If it's very low concentrations, eventually it will pretty much go away by itself because the microbes will eat it. Well, down in northern Florida and a lot of Florida, they don't have the organic material in the soil. And so one of my jobs when I was a young man was I would mix up these microorganisms in a small tank and then batch them up to bigger tanks and then drive around Florida to these old gas stations and then pump these microbes into the ground, and that would help, and nutrients, and that would help these microbes feed on the low levels of contaminants. So, depending on where you're at, it depends on how things act and change. So yeah, sorry, I kind of spun all around the world on that.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. It's really fascinating because the average person doesn't think about that. It's in the ground. It's we think about digging down a foot or two when you're planting a shrub in your backyard or planting some tulip bulbs, but there's a lot more going on well beneath that could be harmful if it's not treated correctly.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
So you were saying earlier you work. I'm sorry. Yeah, keep going.
I was just gonna say, like a little bit of common sense goes a long way. So if you are digging in your backyard, and most people probably don't smell the soil like I do that. That's part of my job. I like that. But if you're digging in your backyard and you start smelling something that smells like gas or oil, it could be something there, and then maybe you do call me or call, you can always call the state, and ask them what's going on, I hope I didn't create a bunch of false alarms where people overreact to things. And, probably in your backyard, you're not going to smell anything unless, you overfilled your lawnmower a bunch of times. But you overfill your lawnmower, unless you're dumping gallons and gallons in the ground, every week, it's going to volatilize and go away. And speaking on that, there's a thing called land farming where we'll dig up volatile contaminants, and instead of paying to send it to a landfill, we'll actually put it on plastic sheets and let the volatiles go up in the air and they go away.
Wow, interesting. Yeah. Several years ago, we actually in my neighborhood here, we actually had a natural gas leak along the sidewalk, and you'd walk down the sidewalk, you'd smell natural gas.
Yeah.
And eventually, somebody got the gas coming out, and they dug up the sidewalk, and they found the crack in the pipe.
Yeah.
It's just a weird kind of thing that people ignore.
Interesting. You mentioned natural gas. So when I'm doing my environmental site assessments, I'm looking for pipelines that go through the property. And actually, ironically enough, where I live here in Brownsburg, I think it's a 3-foot diameter petroleum pipeline is going through my back pasture right here. And so if I was doing a report on my own property, I would mention that. But we see natural gas pipelines all over the place, right? There's gas going to everybody's house. And so what I'll say, hey, there is this natural gas pipeline, but because it's a gas, if there is a release, it's going up in the air. It's not going to contaminate the soil or groundwater. So that would not be an
Right.
environmental concern for what I'm doing.
Sure, sure. But yeah, interesting. What I was going to touch on before, you mentioned that you work with a lot of attorneys, essentially, that and land developers. That those are the kind of people that you work with generally to prepare a plot of land for some construction.
Yeah, it's mostly what I do is bank driven, but those other entities are involved. A lot of times the bank decides who they use, and so often they'll use very large consulting companies, and then sometimes those companies will hire me to work it as an associate consultant, and then I'll have my
Sure.
own clients here locally as well. I would love to work more with local banks and do more work on my own. So what I guess one selling point about myself and my business is that we have the ability to do quick turnaround on projects. 7-10 days on projects. We know how to turn it on quickly. We know Indiana very well, and I work a lot. When things need to be
Sure.
done, I stay up and I do it. And the wife is finally coming around to kind of understand that.
Right.
I am able to go out, and we've got farm animals here, take care of them in the day. But like I've got 4 reports due tomorrow, so I'll be up late tonight and maybe waking up early tomorrow to get them done because the bankers, the developers, they don't uh, they don't sympathize with my with my schedule. They want their stuff when it's due, and I mean
Sure.
I respect that. And um, sometimes I'll
Well,
I'll I'll, I'll not overcommit, but some jobs are easier to do than others. When I start pulling environmental records, if there's 20 sites that are impacted right next to our property, that takes more time, and it is what it is.
right. But that's the advantage of having a small firm. And my business, my GPS tracking is similar. I go above and beyond and outside the normal 9 to 5 business hours to serve a client because that's what this client needs. And you're building your reputation, your business, and that's what is attractive for hiring a firm like yours versus a large consulting firm that may have more restrictions, and you can get things done quicker. So that's how small businesses work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like we don't. I often I get the most work done on Memorial Day, Labor Day, Christmas holidays. Like we don't clock out on these holidays. We get things done and we respond. And I try to be a man of my word in everything that I do. So if I say I'm going to do something, I do it.
Yeah, yeah, good, good. Now, are you licensed in the state of Indiana, and can you work other states as well? How does that work?
Yeah. So I've gotten several licenses. I'm a professional geologist in the state of Indiana. I'm an environmental professional, which isn't really a license, but basically, um, says that I've been doing these reports long enough that I can sign off on them. I can sign off on them so I can sign off anywhere, being that I'm an environmental professional. But I am a licensed professional geologist in Indiana. I'm a licensed radon tester in Indiana, licensed lead paint sampler, licensed asbestos inspector in Indiana. Um, and so I don't like I could write an asbestos inspection report and samples for like a building demolition, but I don't do that. I don't do it enough to where I feel comfortable um, doing that for a property that's being demoed. A lot of these licenses I have are to complement my ability to do phase one environmental science or phase one environmental site assessment successfully. Um, and then with the radon sampling, um, the state and the country has really changed how aggressive we are on doing radon sampling. And so with apartment complexes, we used to just sample one ground floor unit per building. Now we're doing every ground floor unit and then 10% of the upper floors. And so with these, large apartment complexes with 500, 700 units, there's a lot of sampling that's been done. So I do a lot of that as well. And radon gas, we're most of Indiana is a high radon zone, so there's a lot of that work as well. But yeah, licensed Indiana and licensed to do work other places as well.
Okay. So if we had a banker in Illinois that wanted to utilize your services, they could call you and you can at least advise them, if not help them directly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can write reports in Illinois. Absolutely.
Okay,
Yep.
good. Yeah, so I do work with some bankers and network with bankers. And in fact, back in January, I just looked up, in January, I had an environmental attorney on our podcast, Ann Viner. She does this, she is involved in that same sphere that you were involved in, working with developers and banks, and making sure that everything is correct and documented and safe. So it's all part of that ecosystem that you guys all work within. So would love to introduce you to these folks and see how we might be able to have everyone help each other out.
Yeah, absolutely. And just another note, anytime there's a refinance on a property, you got to do a phase 1 environmental site assessment. And the shelf life of these reports are only 180 days. And I get people call me sometimes, they're so upset because I was just out there, 7 months ago, and now their bank's telling them, hey, you got to get them back out there again. And that's because we did the work, and then whatever that deal they were doing didn't go through quickly enough. And guess what? Here I come again to do what I just did. So I do the same properties over and over and over. And I didn't really realize this until I got in this business, but a lot of these, big hardware stores and commercial stores, they're on 5-year adjustable rate loans. So, every 4 years, they're wanting to redo this before their rates go up. So, there's a lot of work to be done out there.
Sure. So do you see the soils changing a lot within 180 days or so, or every couple of years? Is it?
I mean, the soil and the groundwater is not changing. What could possibly change is, so for every report, we try to figure out what the historical use was all the way back to 1940 or first developed use. And we look at aerial photographs, topographic maps, city directories, which are like reverse phone books. They list the tenant based on the address. And then
Sure.
we pull an environmental database report that looks at all these different federal and state databases. And so that's what could change. The gas station, the adjacent gas station would be on the underground storage tank database 7 months ago, and then they could have a release. So then it would be on the leaking underground storage tank database report. So that's what could change.
Gotcha. Okay. That makes sense. Okay. Yeah, it seems like a pretty short time window for a building that's already been built or been developed, the land has been developed, for it to change. But I guess if a neighboring piece of property has some event, it could impact neighboring properties. Okay, cool.
And I get it if you roll your eyes. I mean, you do a building near the lakeshore in Chicago, and I mean, all of Chicago burnt down, and you guys all know the exact year. I forget when it was. The cow kicked over the lantern, and so
yeah, I think it was 1918. If I remember
a lot of stuff is. When was it?
I think it was 1918.
1918. Okay. And another thing that we look at, which is really interesting. It would be interesting in Chicago and Indianapolis, these bigger cities. We look at fire insurance maps, and they no longer really make those anymore. But when things were made out of wood, the insurance companies needed to know what all the structures were made out of, if there are any tanks there or anything. And so I was looking at fire insurance maps for Bloomington, Indiana yesterday, and it's a law firm's office. That's an old house that was built in 1897. And so when I look at these maps, I start at the most recent ones and then go backwards so I can kind of understand what was there. And
Sure.
I'm looking at it and it says D for dwelling and then A for auto garage. And then the garage disappears, like in the 1920s or 1910s. And then like 1900, it's not an auto garage. It's just something different. And then I have to think about it. And of course, I look over a block or two and it says horse stables. Okay, well, there was no auto garage because there weren't very many cars back then. And, there's tanneries nearby back in those days. And so it's really an opportunity to leap back in the history and look at the way things are or were. And I have to catch myself from really diving in deep and like looking around at all these cool things, because I need to crank these reports out, and I could spend a lot of time just looking at things that are interesting. And so I got to pull myself back sometime and just focus on what I'm doing and then move on. But it can be very interesting.
That history is fascinating when you think back to in those. Like I grew up in a town called Des Plaines here in Illinois, not too far from me. And if you look back in some of the history books, a lot of just so many changes when as the town built up over the decades and back in the early 1900s. It's awesome to look back at that and reflect and think about life back then, how things were different.
Yeah, and just looking at aerial photographs, do I don't know, Boone County, Indiana, or Hendricks County, any county. And so 1930s, there's not much there, and then late 40s, 50s, you start seeing more houses come through, and then 60s, 70s, the interstate comes ripping, roaring through there, and then 80s, 90s, the shopping malls come out there, and it's just, in a way, like I've come to accept it more, but in a way, it's a little bit depressing because you see the old times changing to new times. But one thing that's really changed my opinion about humanity and human beings is the fact that when I do the radon testing or go into these apartment complexes, I'll go into 100 people's apartments or homes in a day and just, see how other people are living and what other people are going through. Has really been eye opening and humbling, and has brought me closer to God and increased my faith. There's just a lot of people out there, a lot of people. I don't want to say suffering, but it's just a very diverse world. I grew up in a sheltered world in West Lafayette, and then moving down here to Indianapolis, see all types of people, and a lot of immigrants coming to this country, and a lot of people that have much less than you and I have, Michael, and there's a lot of people sitting around doing very little. I had a lot of work going on during COVID. Everybody was scared of COVID, and I was too, but I kept going, and I worked probably more in COVID than I did before and after, because there was still work to do, and I think a lot of people didn't want to. And there's some people just sit at home all day and play video games all day, and there's obviously other people out working their tails off, working 2-3 jobs. It's just a lot of different folks and how they're living in the world these days.
Yeah, no doubt. There's quite a variety, and all we can do is the best that we can do, and stay focused on what we do best, and serve our clients, and I do the same thing in my business, and I'm in a lot of small businesses, and it's kind of fascinating
It
to take
is.
a step back and watch how it's how some businesses have evolved. I've been some businesses that are in the fourth generation, and you hear the stories, and you see some startup businesses, and they're trying to get their feet on the ground. And a lot of businesses are started by immigrants, and they come to this country with very little, and they build a really nice business. So it's you see the whole spectrum of society, and it's a humbling experience, and it
Yeah.
gives you a reason to pause and come back home and give your kids a hug, and thank the Lord for what you do have, because not everybody is as blessed as many of us are. So
Yeah.
it is humbling.
Absolutely. And another thing that
But
uh, keep going if I can. Another thing that I've
no, go
really
on.
enjoyed in my business is meeting other business owners and learning from them. What worked, uh, and then learning like what didn't work. Those lessons really hit home more than anything. I know I did a job up in northern Indiana a few years ago, and it was a car wash in some small town that didn't really need a car wash. And I remember talking to this guy. He had worked in the factories his whole life, made some money, some retirement money, and then bought this little dumpy car wash for like $1 million, and was not making any money, and basically pissed away all his retirement in that purchase. So just like seeing that, hearing things, has really opened my ears and eyes to what can, what doesn't work. Um, People who own businesses that they inherited, from their parents. Some of them, they'll grow it, make it even better. Um, and then like it's funny too, as I travel throughout the Midwest. Um, Being here in Indiana, I was always scared of Chicago, and just thinking you guys are different, more urban, whatnot, and so I feel most at home here in Indiana, but I try to fit in wherever I go. When I go up to Chicago, I kind of feel. I hope I don't offend anybody here, so apologize in advance.
It's all good.
But I go up to Chicago, I kind of feel a little bit like a redneck. Um, I go down to southern Indiana, parts of Kentucky. I feel like metropolitan aristocrat. So I'm always trying to fit in wherever I go, and probably in an effort to do so, don't fit in anywhere. But it's neat seeing different places and different people, and there's uh, a lot. We all have a lot in common everywhere we go. I remember being in southern Georgia, driving through there, and for whatever reason, I was just following this ambulance. The ambulance was going where I was going, so I was following it. And for whatever reason, the door was like glass, and so I just saw this woman in there, struggling with life. And the day before, I was traveling through another part of Georgia or Florida, and going through school zone when all these people are picking up their kids, and just seeing people 1,000 miles from where I live doing the same things, trying to raise a family, trying to make money, trying to get along with life. Um, I at one point in my life, I was very tainted, and I think a lot of us are, by what we see on TV, on YouTube, on all this stuff. You can kind of get in your area and get an idea and get more and more into that. But if you just kind of open your eyes and look out and observe what's going on, we're all in this together. We're all trying to
Sure.
live and do the best. And I apologize to everybody that I cut off on the interstate and blow by. I've got a nice little sports car, and I'm going to continue to do it. But I mean you no harm. I like to drive my car, and I like to go fast. But we're all in it together, and maybe I should pump my brakes and be more courteous of everybody. But it's a great country we live in. It's a great world, and try to be more considerate of everybody, and it's been good.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. Well, Andy, well said, and I really appreciate you sharing all these details and and what you're passionate about, and how you're helping these small business owners and helping the environment and helping our society be a little healthier and safer, and it's all part of how the world goes around. So I appreciate that, and appreciate getting to know you as well. So thank you for all of that. As we wrap up our show today, any final thoughts you want to share with our audience?
Well, I think that that speech I just gave a couple minutes ago was the last part I wanted to share. As a
Okay,
human being, I've grown, and I want to continue to grow and try to be a good person. Do the Lord's will. Try to understand what He wants me to do, and take care of my family. Help people where I can. So yeah, God bless you, Michael. God bless everybody else, and I hope everybody is at peace with themselves and tries to find peace, and does the best that they can.
very good. Well said. Well said. Well, thank you for that, Andy. And as we wrap up this week's show, I do want to thank Andy. As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, that I selected the law of authenticity from one of the 5 laws of stratospheric success from the book The Go-Giver, and just listening to Andy, especially this last segment here, he's really very authentic. He just wears his heart on his sleeve, and when we first met, that's what I liked about you, and I really I'm happy for the opportunity to get to know you and listening to you share your life's passion. So thank you for that, and hopefully we're all better because of listening to your thoughts. So appreciate you sharing that. So as we wrap up here, I just wanted to put one last little plug in for my day job is Precise Fleet Tracking Solutions, and we do have a lot of business owners that listen to this show. And if you happen to own a commercial vehicles, GPS tracking is an important component in helping your drivers be safer, knowing where they are throughout the day, and in the event of theft or misplacement of any assets like bobcats and backhoes and trailers and mowers, etc. We have devices that can help you with these items. So we'd love to have a deeper conversation about how Precise Fleet Tracking Solutions can benefit your business. We're very passionate about what we do, and we deliver an amazing service. We work very hard to serve our clients as we want to be served. So if you have any thoughts or any questions, any concerns about that, I'd love to hear from you. Best way to reach out to Precise Fleet Tracking is via our website at precisefleettracking.com, or call us at 847-865-6008. That's 847-865-6008. So thank you for that. Again, Andy, thank you so much to you, and I wish you all the best, and give our best to your father as well and the rest of your family. And to our listeners, thank you for listening again this week, and we will talk to you all again next week. So make it a great week. Take care. Thank you for listening to I Got a Guy podcast. For past podcasts and more information, go to igotaguypodcast.com. That's igotaguypodcast.com. Please share this podcast on your social media feeds and tune in again next week to I Got a Guy podcast.